voices.
Okay, take your time. I'm still eating. I'm very slow at that.
Okay, we are live now. Hello, chat.
Okay,
Hopefully this time around it works. I hope you can hear both voices. Um, right now we can both hear each other. You hopefully can too. I'm just gonna check again on my phone, and then we can get started. And
okay,
hopefully it won't die on us.
hopefully.
Yes. Um, I'm just gonna mute myself for a second to check the sound.
Sure.
Okay, the sound is working. You're just a little bit quiet, so I'm gonna um make you louder over on my end, and then we should be fine. Okay, so hi chat. Um, Thanks for tuning in. Today we're gonna talk about what it's like to grow up female in Rajasthan, India. And I have a guest today, and she goes by Sakshi. Um, Sakshi, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself? What made you want to talk about the topic of today?
Sure. First of all, hello to everyone. My name is Sakshi. I'm from Jaipur, Rajasthan. Um, Something that I've always wanted to speak up about is how the condition of women is absolutely deplorable in India and especially from where I come. So that's something that I didn't like. I didn't think it was very comfortable to grow up in, and it wasn't something I wanted to go through my entire life. So I want to change things. I want to be a part of change for women, um, for the condition of women that is there in my state, and I just can't accept the idea of um, women just being nothing more than an object. Like they're just seen for needs that men have and nothing else. They accept on absolute margins of the society. So that's something I've always wanted to change. I've always wanted to talk about, if not change, and make people aware about it. Because living in denial um, won't do anything. So if something is there, then why not speak up about it if something is making you uncomfortable? So that's it.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the way I think we're going to structure it today is similar to how when we first talked. Can you say a little bit like the general situation for women and girls in your state, especially in regards to I think we talked about child marriage primarily.
Yeah.
Um, it's right, it is illegal, but it still happens a lot in practice, and there is a lot of social tolerance. Is that right?
Yes. So child marriage is it's something that is socially acceptable, but of course it is unlawful. It's illegal. So in case of India, um, even if I don't specifically talk about my state, but even in India, there are a lot of things that are allowed by law. Our constitution is very, what should I say, liberal in terms of giving rights to women. Um, but when it comes to social, the social how the society is made up, how the society's mindset is, how they view things, how they see things. Their perspective is very, very, very narrow. Um, in our constitution, it's of course child marriage is illegal, but in my state, it is quite quite common in villages at least, to have child marriage by the age of 9. 9-year olds, they get married, even when they are in school, they get married, and um, after that, like it's not that the bride moves on to the in-laws' house immediately. It happens after she reaches puberty. So around the age of 14 or 15, um, when you're almost an adolescent, um, the moving into in-laws house, that happens later, but the child marriage part happens around the age of 8 or 9. And even then, the partner is decided very much early on. So like that probably happens due to due to the parents' consent. Like um, let's say if they see a suitable boy, if they see a suitable family rather in um, in the childhood, in infancy, like let's say a groom is maybe 2 or 3 years old, a boy 2 or 3 years old, and if they see a suitable girl of that age, or probably a few years younger than that, then they can get them married later on, around the age of 8 or 9. In urban areas, it's um, not as common, but it's still there, and it probably happens around the age of 15 or 16. And I should mention that the legal age to get married in India is 18, um, for boys and for girls. No, wait, sorry. For the bride, it is 18. For the groom, it is 21. So that thing is not taken in account in my state, at least when it comes to the more regressive areas. But in the cities, in the urban areas, it probably doesn't happen as much. But in villages, it is absolutely acceptable. It's socially considered a norm. It's something. Um, I mean, if you didn't get a child marriage, if you didn't have a child marriage, then probably that would be not the norm. So that thing is common, and I guess that's it.
So am I understanding it right? The marriage itself is illegal, but society and um, the the priest or the person, like there is a religious marriage, or what is the kind of process? Who makes the marriage that isn't legally binding but still socially accepted?
Religiously, we don't have any kind of mention it in the Hindu religion. I grew up Hindu, so there's no mention of child marriages um, in the Hindu religion, because of course this is something that happens in in very few areas of India. Like India is a vast nation, so that doesn't happen all over, and it's not something that we grew up learning, because I grew up Hindu and I was never taught about you know marriage as something that would happen a few years later. Like let's say a child starts understanding letters or sentences at the age of 3 or 4. So it's not something they're told on and on about, like you will get married when you're 5 years older, or you will get married when you're at the age of 10 or something like that. So it's there's no mention of it in the religion itself. But this is something that probably I think the way the society is shaped of that particular of a few states. I mean, it also happens in Uttar Pradesh. It also happens in Haryana. So it's a few states, and it is not bound by religion. But you can say that in Hindu religion, at least, the child marriage happens between two. I mean, the bride and groom. There's not much difference between their age. It's like, let's say, 2 or 3 years of difference, or 3 or 4 years. If you come to Islam, if you come to Muslims, then child marriage happens, um, like, let's say, maybe a 40 or 50-year-old man getting married to a 15 or 16-year-old. So that's still child marriage, but the age difference is huge. So religion comes into play in the sense that there's not much difference in Hindus, and it's not mentioned, as long as, sorry, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I have studied the religion. But I think it's more of the way our culture developed, the particular culture of the state developed, and the kind of regressive rulers we might have had, the kind of kings we might have had. But I don't think there's mention of it in the religion itself.
Okay, that's good to know and sad but interesting that the various forms of child marriage.
Yeah.
Um, so do you know some women or girls personally who have been in these child marriages, and can you talk about what it means for the individual girl, how it limits her, or what freedoms she might retain?
Yeah. So my parents, um, at my parents' place, they have a maid who, right now, she's 29-year old. Okay, and she had child marriage. She was married off at the age of 9. Um, the moving in to in-laws, that happens later. So that's called gona. The word for it is gona. That particular custom that happens later on. So she moved into her in-laws later on, and probably, I think, 1 year after that, she was pregnant. She had a child, and right now she has 4 kids. Three are daughters. One is son. One is her son. So um, I think the age of those kids is probably around 7 or 8 year old. That 8 year old is probably her oldest, eldest kid, I think. So the way it has shaped her is she's very misogynistic, in the sense that she sees women, she sees um, her daughters. She didn't. She probably didn't appreciate their birth as much as she appreciated the birth of her son. Like, that's very common in my state, that people have more than 2 kids to have a son. In India, we have this campaign that hum do hamare do, like, two people in a family, that's the couple, they should have 2 kids only, because that helps with the population, and a lot more other things. Even the woman is not able to manage 3 kids or bear the pregnancy, and there are all sorts of things about that. So what happens is, that campaign is often disregarded when it comes to having a son. So if, let's say, a family has 2 daughters, okay, so they will want a third child as a son. they will want a son for a third child. Or even if the third child is not a son, then they will move on to a fourth one. So that's something I think very common in my state, like having 3 to 4 kids in hope of having a son. And even if somebody is, let's say somebody does have 2 daughters only, then the kind of it's not like they are refrained from misogyny. The daughters still have to face misogyny, like, I probably wanted a son, I didn't want you instead. So things like that. So that has shaped her in that way, and her misogyny is still there. She still thinks if a if a woman gets cheated on, or if a woman is, you know, she she faces dowry, um, stigma due to dowry or something like that, then it's the fault of the woman herself. It's not something that should be blamed on men. It's not something that should be that the man should be punished for. It's something that the woman has to live with. That's the consequences. Whatever happens, she has to live with the consequences. So that has shaped her definitely, and possibly her daughters also have to listen to the misogynistic thoughts that she has. Um, Something like her daughters have to do housework, be a housewife, or be a homemaker instead of going out and earning. And considering that she's the one in her family who earns and not her husband, she still has that kind of mindset. I mean, her husband doesn't earn, um, and that's another topic. I mean, that's common, like the husband being an alcoholic and the woman going out to earn. That's a different topic. But despite all of that, she she has misogynistic perspective in a lot of subjects, and she probably passes it on to her daughters and to her son.
Okay. I think that's a really difficult issue and a painful one when women um, take these values as their own and repeat them and give them to the next generation. I think that's
Yeah.
an important topic, and I also want to come back to the preference for boys. But just to finish the topic of child marriage, I wanted to ask if a girl or woman wants to get out of such a marriage, what can she do? What kind of risks does she take when she does ask for help somewhere?
Okay, so that's a very good question, considering it is happening now. So what happens is, as I mentioned before, that many a time it happens that school kids, 9 or 10 year olds, they are married off. So a lot of the times, it happens that the girl has to discontinue her education. The boy is allowed to continue his education. He's allowed to go to school, further on go to college or something like that. But after the marriage, the girl is supposed to discontinue her education and be a good homemaker, or learn how to be a good homemaker. So, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
If she wants to get out of the
Yeah.
engagement or the marriage as a child or as a teenager or as an adult, what can she do? What are her avenues or chances?
Yeah, so now that like this is something that is taught to girls, or that is taught in school from early on. Like child marriage is something that is socially acceptable, but something that shouldn't happen. And all disadvantages of that are mentioned and taught to kids in school. So that's something that um, the government has, included in the syllabus. And if the teachers, if they teach this to students, or if the students are, you know, what should I say? They're probably perceptive enough for that to understand. Um, then it has happened that girls, um, when they were having the child marriage, they went to the police and they um, filed an FIR against their own family, against the whole village, um, mentioning that they are forcing us into marriage and this shouldn't be happening. We want to study, we want to build a career, we want to do this, we want to do that. So this has happened. If This is something that we have started including in our textbooks, and this is something we are, making villages or making people more aware about. And there are some kids, there are especially girls, of course, um, who have come out, who have spoken up about it, who have filed an FIR against it. And I should mention that if the police gets a whiff of a child marriage happening around, then they do take action. But what happens most often is like everybody around denies it. Like the child denies it, the family denies it, the village denies it. The child is taught to deny it. So the police probably does its job, but you know, if something that is taught over and over, something that is accepted by everybody, then that becomes kind of acceptable. So I have seen a few very recent cases of this happening, of girls speaking up about it, and later on they probably might have to shift to a city or to somewhere else where they can build a career, um, where they won't be um, disregarded from the village by the panchayat. Like if you don't accept everything that is acceptable in the village, that is societally acceptable in the village, then you can be um, told to move out of the village, thrown out of the village, rather. So they might have to move to a city, but that has happened that they have spoken up about it, and the campaign or the awareness of the government is not that good, but it is happening. It is very slowly taking place, but it is happening, and a few girls have spoken up about it.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some hope, but still, even if the police intervenes and is able to get the girl out of the situation, she's gonna have to start over in a new place. So there are probably girls who don't want to be married, but they decide to stay because starting over, especially when you're that young, um, sounds like a really huge
Yeah.
challenge. Yeah.
It is very huge, and but I think the biggest decision is to defy the village heads and to defy what is, so much, um, so deep in our roots, so deep in how our society functions. I think that is the biggest step, because afterwards the journey becomes easier. At least that has been my experience, but of course I can't speak for everybody else. And I hope that even if they're able to stay in their village and change their mindset, then that's better for us all.
Yeah, I think so too. I wanted to ask one more thing about the topic, and that is, so there is movement to end child marriage. I presume there's a lot of feminists working on it. Is there
Yeah.
also a counter movement of anyone arguing why this should be acceptable or why this is actually good for girls or boys? Is there like a conservative, regressive of that kind? Is there someone outspoken in favor of this, or is it the thing that is keeping this practice in place is more um, like you said, like quiet, hush hush. If anyone asks questions, or like the people who support it would still prefer to not talk openly. What's the situation there?
Okay, so there's no movement against it. Um, but of course, like the elders, I don't know how much other people know about it. The elders in India, they are very much respected. The young people, anybody younger than you, should always bow down to you. So if the elders say something that okay, this should be done, then that would be the thing that will be done. There's not much defying the norms or something like that. Even if we want to change something, then that happens. I mean, we started with changing the viewpoints of our elders first. So there's no um, actual movement against it, because I think if anybody has a basic level education, then they all know that child marriage is not something that is very acceptable. That's not something that should be done. Ruining your education, ruining your career, not having knowledge of very something very basic is not something that anybody a little bit who's a little bit educated would prefer. But it mostly comes from people who aren't educated all that much, or even if they are educated, then they are upholders of a society, a male dominated society. So that thing happens, but um, there are no men coming out um, actively speaking up about being in favor of child marriage, because I think as much as I understand it, it's harmful for men too. Being I don't know, being forced into an institution that you don't understand at such a young age, that having kids, even when you are a teenager yourself, that's something that would be pretty pretty regressive, even for men. So I don't think there's any kind of mass movement against it. But the only kind of um, kind of let's say um, acceptance for child marriage comes from elders, old people above the age of 60 or something, who have either lived in a village for their whole life, or who, even if they live in a city now, have come from a very narrow minded thinking. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay, then unless you want to add anything, I'd move on
Yeah.
to next topic. Okay, then I would talk about to the extent that you want to your experiences with the families preferring boys and when they can't have boys, blaming girl children for it. Like if I remember correctly, for you that started very, very early. That's sort of
Yeah.
blaming you for not having been born a boy. Um, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned before, there's a campaign by the government. It probably started after 1980. That's that's when India was moving towards globalization, and the government knew that now it's Now the population is going to increase rapidly. So what they can do instead is have a campaign or have a slogan, "Hum do, hamare do." That's two of us in a couple, like the man and the woman, of course. And I mean, in the sense that homosexuality is was still not acceptable then. It's now, but not then. It wasn't then. So hum do, like the man and the woman, and hamare do means they should only have two kids. So of course, the government didn't mention that you should have one boy or one girl or something like that. But considering how male dominated the society is, or how um, the unemployment was going to hit the market at that time, families started preferring um, boy child over girl child. I think that would have probably happened even before the 1980s, considering how the Indian society hasn't been very progressive early on. But that started happening. So now the family wants a boy child, and the government has said that you should only have two kids. It's not like we will get any kind of ban, or we will face any kind of stigma or something if the family has more than two kids. But you know, the advantages of it were taught early on. Like uh, it would be good for the mother, or it would be um, economically and financially even a good planning for you only to have two kids. So um, what the families started doing is, if they had a girl child, okay, um, either they were they committed female infanticide, or if they could determine the sex of the child before birth, then they committed female feticide. Okay, and now later on, like as soon as the girl is born, she could be killed. But even after that, if they don't kill the girl child, like they let her grow up and have a life of her own, then too she faces a lot of stigma, a lot of comments, a lot of um, harsh or mean things she gets to hear only for being a girl, only for being a daughter. So what happens is, the abortions started um, happening a lot, mainly because they wanted to commit female feticide, and if they weren't able to determine the sex of the child, then they would commit female infanticide. And like it happened in my family, my parents did that. Um, my sister was supposed, I mean, after my elder sister, when my mother got pregnant, they determined the sex of the child. So after determining the sex, they came to know that it's going to be a girl, and they aborted the kid. So basically, my parents did commit female feticide, and after that, there was another pregnancy. Um, they didn't determine the sex then. Um, they let the child be born. So of course, that was me. But since they wanted a boy, they already had a girl, my sister. So they wanted a boy, and seeing that I was not a boy, unfortunately, they um, they let me. know it throughout my life. Like probably I started understanding sentences at the age of 2.5, 3 years old, and I think um, as far as I can remember, or since as soon as I started understanding sentences, I could only hear my mother saying that I wanted a boy, I didn't want you, or I wish you weren't born, or I wished to have a son. I I already have a daughter, and I didn't want another one. So there was this there was this verbal disconnect with my mother. Um, but of course, there was also a lack of affection in every which way you can think of. Like if I had an injury, or if I had an illness, then she wouldn't look after me. She would she would prefer I if if my injury or illness was gone on its own, or if anybody else took care of it. She wouldn't bother. And even if let's say I got hungry, or if I needed something in my school or something, then that wasn't taken care of. Probably because she wasn't that much attached to me. And there was also lack of physical affection. There was, I mean, no hugs, no kisses, no nothing like that. There was always favoritism for my elder sister, since she was the desirable daughter. So that was there. Favoritism was there. That was lack of affection was there. Verbal disconnect was there. And this is something that not only came from my mother, this also came from other family members. Like my papa used to only buy me things. He didn't talk to me much. If let's say I wanted chips or biscuits or something like that, then he would only buy me snacks. But not so much was taken care of, like my education or my co-curricular activities or something like that. Of course, my grandma and my aunt, um, we live in a joint family, so they were there. And my grandma didn't show me affection as well for the same reason. My aunt didn't show me um, hate or disappointment, but I could sense that nobody in my family was very close to me. Probably my uncle was nice to me, but nobody else in my family was very much connected to me, was very much willing to show me affection, or um, willing to even spend a few minutes with me. So that's something that I've always lived through my life, and that's something. I mean, a boy child or a male child would probably never face, even if they are an alcoholic, a smoker, or unemployed, things like which are frowned upon in the Indian society. They would probably never face a lack of affection from family, at least from their friends, or relatives and such. So that's something being a girl child does to you. And I think that's something probably a son would never face, or even could understand that this happens in families who have daughters or who have daughters who didn't want a daughter. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Um, it's like I criticize my own culture for many, many things, and we do have many issues here, but I am I've never heard of such a thing happening. Like that level of cruelty simply because someone was born female. Um, so the adjacent topic to that we also discussed the first time we talked is that of course this has long-term repercussions for you or another woman or girl who experienced something similar. Um, but then you hit another problem that is that when you show symptoms of depression or other mental illness, there is a huge stigma in society. There is even in Germany, but you said it's quite extreme in India. And instead of uh, looking to help the individual, they're again an embarrassment to their family. Is that correct?
Yeah, so mental illness is something that's never talked about in Indian society. There's complete lack of awareness. We don't learn about it in school. We don't learn about it in college. Um, and don't even expect your family or your parents to teach you about it. The only kind of mental illness people understand is labeling everyone as crazy or mad. It's like if somebody mentions, somebody with kind of like I did psychology in college. So that was the only gateway to learning about mental illnesses for me. Now, if somebody doesn't take it up as a subject, then for them, everybody who has any kind of mental disorder or personality disorder or mood disorder, they're all labeled as mad. Okay, so let's say somebody mentions autism, somebody mentions Asperger's, somebody mentions depression or bipolar or vast multitude of um, kind of disorders that are there of the human body. They will all be labeled as mad, at least in the Indian society. As far as my parents' generation is concerned, but with my generation, of course, there's a bit of awareness, a bit of opening up about it. But that only came with the help of social media, and that's mainly prevalent in bigger cities like Mumbai, Delhi, or something like that. But still, even with my generation, there's a lot of stigma. There's a lot of holding back when it comes to talking about your mental health. Now, so as you mentioned, I had depression. I still have depression. So it all started with college. Um, it actually started with school, but I realized I had depression until I reached the second year of my college. So it started with school. Um, it it's actually something very menial. It's not something even that big. It started with choosing um, choosing the subjects that I wanted to study in school. So I wanted to make a career in humanities, and my parents wanted me to either study commerce or science because obviously, humanities is a subject for dumb kids. It's not something that very intelligent kids study. And if you are an intelligent kid, then you would want to study science or commerce or business or something like that. So they wanted me to be a doctor. And I should mention that this is not something that um, I ever mentioned. I never mentioned that I wanted to be a doctor. Even throughout my whole childhood, I never had a thought of being a doctor. It's not something um, I was fascinated towards. I wasn't. I don't know. I never had a passion about being a doctor. So that's something my parents wanted me to be. So they wanted me to take up science, and there was a lot of crying and arguing about it. I wanted to take up humanities, and I wanted to stick to my decision. But of course, my parents didn't want that. Um, so they wanted me to study science. I did study science for 2 years in school, and after that, I wanted to be sure about which college I want to go to, and um, where that would be. So I had shortlisted a few colleges, and I was very sure about where I wanted to go. But my parents didn't want me to leave my hometown. Um, that's another thing that comes with being a girl is you're not allowed to grow up on your own. You're supposed to grow up when as and when your parents want you to. So they wanted me to stay in my hometown, and they did allow me to continue with humanities in college, but it wasn't the particular field that I wanted to go in. So I took up any subject that was closest to my field, and I studied that in college. Now that was I studied the first year, and like for 3 years, I had been studying something that I didn't want to. I had been probably wasting my time. I had let go of so many minutes, so many seconds, so many hours and days of my life doing something I didn't want to do. And only because my parents weren't broad minded enough to let me study something that not many people in let's say of our social upbringing study. So um, I had been wasting so much of my time, and when I reached my second year, um, I realized that I didn't have as much energy as I used to have. I've been like I used to do such um, day-to-day tasks like eating and sleeping and studying and whatever that was there, that assignments and homework from college. I used to do that, and I didn't have a lot of energy for that. Like I used to have so much energy before this. So why am I not able to do these things that I used to do, so easily? Like let's say a few years ago. So that's when it hit me that I might be depressed, and it only came with studying about psychology. As I mentioned, I studied psychology in college, so that only came from understanding what a mental illness can be, or how depression affects you, or what the symptoms of it are. So I realized it hit me in the second year of my college. And now that I do have the realization of it, um, I have accepted it, and what should I say? Now I'm more aware of it, like what I'm doing or what I should be doing to at least keep my depression at bay. So um, by the time I realized it, it was quite late. So of course, all the mood swings or all the uh, symptoms that come with depression, like loneliness or crying or I don't know, headaches or a load on your mind. Like your mind is fighting with so much. So that thing, as it was dawning on me, um, it took some time. So until and unless then my parents thought that she has gone mad. Of course, the thought of me being depressed won't occur to them. So they were like, okay, she has gone mad. We need to call a priest. We need to call a pastor. We need to call um, a Sufi saint or anybody from any religion. If they can fix a daughter, then please let's call them. They weren't The thought of visiting a therapist never occurred to them. The thought of visiting even a physician never occurred to them. Um, the only thing that could probably cure me was somebody with a spiritual or religious understanding. So what they did was they started talking to people, especially men, because it's mostly men who do that. And they started talking to men who went around claiming to be um, spiritual leaders, or claiming to be readers of the mind, or claiming to be people who can understand other people without who can understand other people's personality without them saying much, or without them mentioning what they are like. So, and it's like a very common thing in at least the Indian society. People claiming to be that, people claiming to be spiritual leaders or something like that. You can find them at weddings. There will always be two or three people like that at every wedding. You can find them at any social gathering, events, or something like that. So every social gathering that we went to, it was um, it was a nightmare for me. Like I couldn't, first of all, I couldn't bear the burden of interacting with so many people, interacting about where my career was supposed to go, what I want to do in future. I couldn't bear that, let alone talk to somebody who wants me to fix my mind. These spiritual leaders, what they would ask me is, do you see a devil, or do you see any kind of evil spirit where you live, where you sleep, or even do you have any kind of nightmares? Do you have thoughts about uh, defying your parents or disobeying your parents or something like that? And do you have any kind of evil spirit following you or something like that? Or if not that, then that would be it would be like following some kind of what should I say, like they would mention certain things that you should do and that would cure you of your depression. So like they would say that sit in the northeast direction, or sit at a particular angle, or do fast, or do puja, pray to this god, pray to that god, visit temple, visit church, do this so many times a year, wear this kind of ring, wear this kind of necklace, wear this kind of ornament, or something like that. They would say things like that, like do this and then your life will be perfect, do this and then your mind will be at peace, do this and then she will become a good daughter, she will start listening to her parents or something like that. So that started happening. Like my parents would um, go out looking on for each and every person who could cure their daughter of her madness, who could cure her of whatever she has on her mind. Like, why does she turn off the light in her room and start crying? Why does she not listen to her parents, what her mother is saying, what her father is saying, why she doesn't want to meet the relatives anymore, or why she does what she does. So that's something, that's how living with a mental illness is. And this is probably my experience in the sense that um, I won't say that this is something because I come from a very regressive state in India. I would say that this also happens in very many big cities. Like even in, let's say, Kolkata or Mumbai or Bangalore is very forward in the when it comes to thinking of people, or at least my parents' generation. Then even in those cities, um, people my age face a lot of stigma from their families, um, and like visiting a therapist is not something that is absolutely recommended. That even comes to people's mind. Like, if somebody wants to be a doctor in India, the thought of being a therapist, a psychiatrist, never crosses their mind. I mean, it probably, like, a very few people think of even going into that profession. Very many people want to be a heart surgeon or want to be a neurosurgeon or optician. Um, and they want to heal other parts of the body. But talking about the mind is such a stigma in the Indian society that I can say this, that what's my experience is probably very much prevalent. And I mean, at least I only have depression. But with other people who have mental illnesses since birth, or who have personality disorders since birth, that's kind of like they probably face a lot more stigma than everybody in the society than I do. I mean, they are labeled as mad. They will only be called as mad, and probably the social circle is very small. The kind of interactions they have is limited to a few people. Um, but yeah, like talking about mental illnesses is not very acceptable in India. I would say that for once, people will talk about feminism or homosexuality or other topics that come with that are labeled as Western values or something like that. But talking about the mind is totally unacceptable.
Okay, I just wanted to ask quickly if anyone at any point ever said, um, instead of looking for the problem with you or a evil spirit, ever said, well, what's your life story? Because um, the way that you explain it now, it makes perfect sense. I mean, who wouldn't be depressed if their entire family constantly told them that they're less than, and that they're a failure just for how they were born? Um, did anyone ever, or did you maybe meet another woman who had a similar life story? Or did you have to figure it out on your own once you were in college?
I haven't met any other woman who has faced as much stigma of being a daughter as much as I have faced it. And I should mention that I'm very vocal about it. I'm very vocal about what I have faced in my family. But I haven't come across any other woman who has felt the same. I even have families, I even have friends in families where where the parents had a third child just for, having a, just for the sake of the third child being a son. But even in those families, and the daughters didn't um, face any kind of misogyny when it came to them being born, or when it came to um, the sex. So that wasn't there. I mean, I haven't met any other woman who has faced as much misogyny as I have faced in my home. So, like they have faced other kinds of misogyny, like if I know my friend is getting married, then the dowry that she has to give would be a minimum of 25 lakhs. So that's something that probably wouldn't happen in my family. But the stigma of being born as a girl child, I don't think I have met any other person who has faced it as much as I have.
Okay. Thanks for answering that. I'd have to quickly jump back to the topic from before about child marriage because someone in the chat asked a question
Yeah.
specifically about the type of marriage where an adult man, like you said, 40 or 50s, marries a teenage girl. How is that justified, that age gap, in the specific communities that do that?
How is it justified? I think there's a mention of it in the religion that they follow. Um, I won't be like, I should mention it at first that I have never read the Quran. Okay, so the only justification of it that I have heard is on the internet that probably Muhammad uh, wanted to marry a younger girl named Aisha. So that's the kind of justification that is there in the religion. But um, I should mention that this is something like I haven't read that religious text. Okay, so I'm not going to be too sure about it, but the justification is that the one I mentioned, the Muhammad marrying Aisha, and that's probably what they believe too, the ones having child marriage, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, that's also what I read. Uh, Even though from, well, a practical standpoint, um, when a girl who isn't fully grown yet has a pregnancy, that is a higher risk than when you actually let her become a young adult first. So from a
Yeah,
practical point of view, this is um, it's objectively dangerous, and
yeah,
still it's practiced. So
yeah.
yeah, it's definitely very deep misogyny. Um, Another topic that I wanted to talk about um, that we also touched on when we first talked is sort of, it's a big topic. You can just take it wherever you want, of puberty, sexuality, and sex ed. Because I remember when we talked, um, there were a number of similarities in um, the education, or rather the lack of education that we received. Um, Even though geographically we're so far apart, I felt like when it came to that specific topic, we have a lot of common problems. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so puberty, sex education, and
And sexuality, just
sexuality.
as a teenage girl growing up, what were the sort of values that were around in society? Did school further those, or were they trying a more kinder, more liberal approach there? Um, what was the information you received and the attitudes around you?
Okay, so starting with puberty, I probably got a lot more attention from men who were um, older than my father, who were either of my father's age or older than him. So let's say, like when I reached 12 or 13 years of age, I I got a lot more attention from 40-year-old man, from 45-year-old men. That's something that I didn't I hadn't noticed until then, before the age of 13. So like pedophilia is not so much present in our culture, but considering how men have been taught to view women as objects, to not have any sexual interaction with them when you are um, when you know when there are when your body is filled with hormones, teenage hormones, or not develop any kind of crush or not have any kind of girlfriend or boyfriend when you are even in your 20s. The only kind of acceptable interaction with the opposite sex, um, at least when it comes to sexual or loving relationship, is one that you have with your wife. So that's something that should only happen after marriage. Okay, so of course that means a lot more curiosity towards the opposite sex, and a lot more lustful eyes towards the opposite sex. So um, like let's say even the girls are not taught so much about um, the opposite sex, like what kind of genitalia they have, what kind of um, things they like or what they don't like, or what kind of people they are, because uh, the sex division is very what should I say, very prevalent in the Indian society. You know how radical feminists in the West, they fought for female spaces, um, only female spaces in public. So that's something that we didn't have to fight for in India, because that's something that has always been there. Like if I'm a girl, then I'm supposed to have only female friends, or um, if a guy is supposed to have friends, then he should only have male friends or something like that. So the interaction with the opposite sex is kind of frowned upon, and that creates a kind of curiosity for the opposite sex. So, considering how so many men from from my parents' generation, they were denied every kind of interaction that could be there with the opposite sex. They are very, they have very lustful eyes towards girls once they reach puberty, 12 or 13-year olds. Um, as I mentioned, the pedophilia is not very much prevalent in the society, in the religion itself. So that thing starts after the age of 12 or 13. So that's something I started noticing that happened to me at the age of 13. Sexuality, the only kind of acceptable, acceptable sexuality in the society is the one that is considered to be natural. Okay, only the man and the woman are are the ones who are supposed to get married, or the ones who are supposed to have relationships. Now, I should mention that even when it comes to men and women, it's um, it's like the only kind of relationship they should have is that of a marriage. Okay, because opposite sex, interaction is frowned upon before marriage. So what happens is when you see in public, the only kind of affection you're allowed to show is one with your same-sex friend. So let's say if I want to hold hands with somebody in public, um, so that would be my female friend. Or if a man wants to hold hands of somebody in public, that that would only be his male friend. Couples can do that also, but um, um, like before marriage, it's kind of frowned upon. Not that like it's not mentioned in the law or anything, but the kind of opposite sex interaction is so unacceptable. Like the only kind of affection you can show is with your friend in public. Only that thing is allowed. And um, if I talk about homosexuality, then um, I should mention that that was there, that is mentioned in the Hindu religion, um, that is mentioned in Kama Sutra, that is, we have paintings and sculptures of it, we have carvings of it on on our ancient temples.
Just one question. Is it both
Yeah.
lesbian homosexuality and gay homosexuality?
Yes.
Okay,
And
both.
um, yeah. So um, it's like both are acceptable, and sorry, it was acceptable, and the carvings of it are there on the ancient temples. Um, that thing was probably what should I say? The regressive mindset about it came um, with the kind of invasions that we had, the Mughal invasions or the Victorian laws that we had because of the British colonization. Um, but homosexuality was acceptable in the Indian society before. And I should mention that it was only acceptable for the elites, people working in the court or people working, people who had their businesses or people who were rich. It was only acceptable for them. The Dalits, the untouchables, they couldn't be, I mean, they weren't allowed to express their homosexuality. Probably because, I mean, I don't know the reason for it, but I am assuming that it was probably because they were the working class, so they had to produce kids so they can continue working on, and they could stay in the caste that they were born, like they couldn't move upward or something like that. So I'm guessing, I'm assuming it's probably because of that. But homosexuality was more acceptable um, before we had all these kinds of invasions in India. Now it has made a comeback again. We got rid of the law that was considering it illegal. That was uh, like you couldn't be, you know, a same-sex couple in public. That law we have got rid of last year. Um, but yeah, the marriage thing, same-sex couples can still not get married in India. I should mention that. Um, then moving on to sex education. Um, yeah, so sex education, it's um, what should I say? Completely untouched topic. Completely something that you have to learn from the internet. Um, it's something that is there in our textbooks, but that is of a very limited, um, like the what should I say, knowledge that you should be gaining is not enough. So when I was in school, we studied about it at 14 years of age in 8th standard, and like I come from an all girls school, so we did study about it, and our teacher was probably not embarrassed to teach about it because it was an all girls school. But this topic is very untouched. It's something that is not thought about much uh, when you are in a co-ed school, when you go to a school where there are both boys and girls in the same class, or when you are there in a boys' school, it's not taught much. And even the things that we were taught, they were only about firstly there was mention of periods, like the monthly cycle that women have. That was well mentioned. Um, Genitalia of both the sexes, of um, the male and female genitalia that we studied. Um, Coitus, how sex happens, or how you um, how kids are made. That's something we were taught. But things about consent, things about um, what should I say?
Pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure, female pleasure wasn't taught at all. Even male pleasure wasn't taught. Um, they thought that um, sex is only something that men get a pleasure out of. So um, that wasn't there. And what else? The the part of the genitalia that should be stimulated um, for the woman, or the different kinds of positions that could be there. That's something obviously we weren't taught, um, and that's something like even in our law, like if rape is mentioned, then only very few kinds of rape are mentioned. Like if the penis touches the vagina, then that is forcefully, then that is considered rape. Or if I don't know, if penis touches the clitoris forcefully, then that is considered rape. But oral sex or anal sex or any other kinds of rape that could happen, that's something that we didn't learn about. That is something that is not present in our law. It was added much more later. And like the only thing that we learned was how the genitalia looks and how kids are made. Okay, and that's something I only learned because I come from an all girls school. But if you went to a school where both the girls and boys were allowed to sit together, then you probably didn't learn as much. And if you went to a government school, then you probably didn't learn as much as we did. So that's something like, um, and I should also mention that sex ed, that topic is only something we learn in school. If you want more information about it, then you can only learn it from the internet. I mean, your parents won't teach you anything about it. Your parents would especially want to avoid the word sex, want to avoid anything related to that topic. And even if there's some kind of kissing scene on the television, then that should be absolutely avoided. I mean, that's something that's an awkward moment for the entire family. I mean, everybody would turn their faces away from the screen. So don't don't expect your family to teach you that. And um, the next step comes is the internet, porn movies, or um, for us, Hollywood movies, especially American movies, they are soft porn because for us, no kind of affection is shown in the movies. If you watch Bollywood movies, then um, there's no kind of kissing, there's no mention of sex on the screen. The only kind of affection you can show is hugs, cheek kiss, that's all. So, American movies with women moaning, or with actors half nude, they were soft porn for us. And then we moved on to actual porn that the internet has for a sex education. So that's something that where we get a sex education from, and of course that's leading to a rise in teenagers raping minors. Like if let's say a teenager, 14 or 15 or 15-year old boy watches porn, and he watches hardcore porn. He's only watching the woman as something that exists for the male pleasure, then he gets that idea. He develops his mind that way. So that's something that is leading to a rise in minor rapes in India, like 3 and 4-year-old girls being raped by 14 or 15-year-old boys. So that's where the lack of sex education, the lack of information about the topic of sex and sexuality is leading the society towards.
Okay. And that's where I feel like this is really basically a global phenomenon because um, I've spent a lot of time looking at my own experience, but also more broadly in German society, also the same dynamics that, of course, as you go through puberty, you will be interested in sex. Then your family is going to be kind of squeamish, probably not as bad as in India, but still, you yourself will be squeamish about the subject, but also interested at the same time. And it's also extremely normal here that young people and teenagers will try to close the gap by looking at pornography. And of course, pornography will not help. It'll
Yeah.
actually actively misinform and, like you said, encourage dehumanizing women. And then I guess my next question would be around um, this is again probably a global problem that yes, we do have a third wave of feminism happening, but it's not that it shies away from criticizing pornography. Or it even wants to consider pornography something good, something that holds potential to be a tool of education. And as you know, I strongly disagree with that. And I'd like to know how you feel and how you experience the feminist environment when discussing this particular subject.
Okay, so pornography is not something I have ever been um, involved with. It's not something I have watched even for, like, let's say I've never watched even an entire porn clip. It's like when I was a teenager, it's something that is talked about in your friend circles. It's something that is at least mentioned um, when you start talking about sex among your friends, when you start discussing what the opposite sex likes. So the word porn, of course, comes up. So that happened with me once. Like I was on the internet looking up something, and a porn movie started playing. So of course I was very much horrified by it. I I didn't like what was happening in front of me. So I turned off the computer. I I thought it was some kind of virus or something that led to that horrific thing on the screen. So I turned off the computer. After that, I never watched it on my own. But I think around the age of 18 or 19, a friend of mine, a friend of mine showed me a clip. Like, okay, let's watch porn. That's a female friend. That was a female friend of mine. And I said that I don't think I will be, you know, as much excited as you might think that I would be. So she said that, okay, never mind, let's see it, and you'll decide whatever you want to decide at the end of it. So I said, okay. I started watching the clip, and I think 3 or 4 seconds in, um, the woman's top or the shirt, whatever she was wearing, that was gone. And I mean, like her breasts, they weren't very, you know, human. Of course, you could see the surgery that was done, and you could see that that was not the way it should be. Breasts, they are a part of our body. They are not very perfect. They are not very big, or they are not very um, perfectly shaped the way it is shown in porn. Like it's not as perfectly as a porn movie shows it. They can be imperfect. They can be not equal or something like that. So whatever was happening on the screen, and obviously I noticed that even the man or the woman that was there in the video clip, they weren't enjoying it. There was no love, there was no connection between them, and they were doing it only for the sake of doing it. Now, probably people who watch it, they are not very, I don't know, they don't notice it the first time or even the 10th time, that what's happening there is not very intimate. It's not something um, that normally happens um, when two people want to do it voluntarily, or when two people are consenting. So, the only kind of porn that I have watched is a few seconds of a clip, or something that my friends showed me. And even then, I didn't like the idea of it. I didn't understand it very much. Um, and I have had 1 or 2 friends who said that they enjoy watching porn, and they had to be stopped by their parents. They had to be told not to do that by their parents. Um, but that's something that I have not involved myself in personally. And if we come to feminism that is happening online, that is the kind of feminism that supports pornography. Um, I probably, if you are new on the internet, if you are new to feminism on the internet, then the first kind of um, pages on Facebook, or let's say the kind of messages or pictures that you come across on social media, is from liberal feminists. the ones who support pornography, the ones who support prostitution, the ones who support any kind of degradation that is there for women. Um, that's the first thing that you come across. Okay, so I started interacting with them. I thought that if this is feminism, then probably I don't agree with everything that they have to say, but I do agree with a few things that they have to state, that they have to say, like women should be allowed to have equal wages, or women um, should be allowed to make their own choices, even though these are some topics that don't concern us Indians. I mean, in India at least, the salary of a woman is should be equal to that of a man. That's at least mentioned in the law. Wages in the wage inequality is definitely there, um, but that's something that people like you and me, if we talk about it, then nothing will come out of it, because the kind of women who face that inequality, they don't know much about um, this discussion happening online. So that didn't concern me much. Like that topic wasn't something that I could relate to, but I did agree with a few things, and I thought that okay, if I don't agree with them on prostitution or pornography, then maybe with time I can change my mind. But that thing didn't happen, and I started, keeping myself on the fringes um, of feminist circles. Like I would speak up about a few things, but I would be silent on most. So I started looking out more for people like me. So um, that brought me closer to Marxists. They um, Marxists and communists. They agreed with the kind of thinking that I had. They agreed with what I had to say, and they said that okay, yeah, if you have this doubt, if you have this um, particular thing you want to say, then it's okay to have that kind of thinking, and there's a reason for it. I mean, I wasn't very vocal about what I wanted to say, because I was probably scared of being attacked online, of being cyberbullied. So I didn't speak up much about it. But being with communists, I realized that it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to learn something new, and it's okay if you want to question something. There might be a reason for a question, which probably a lot of feminist circles don't entertain. They don't entertain your questions, they don't entertain what you have to say. If you want to doubt something, if you want to ask something, then um, you will probably get cyberbullied, you will probably get dumped on. A lot of reporting and blocking and things like that happens. So I never understood the kind of choice feminism that they were talking about, like sex work is work, or some women choose to do it, or um, pornography is something that some women enjoy, even though in the porn clips it was clearly visible that the woman is not enjoying it, um, or saying that some women like to have sex with 20 men in a day for merely what, half a dollar. And Like that's something I never understood. And I should mention that the idea of pornography is not very acceptable in the Indian society. Like watching porn is not very acceptable. Like if right now, as I mentioned, that minors are getting raped by teenagers, then most people in our society understand that it's because of porn. It's because of the kind of sexualization that is so prevalent in media. So they understand that it's a result of that. And I should also mention that when we had a liberal government in power, it wanted to ban porn, and they probably should have gone with a decision. They probably should have not let the common citizen decide it, because after that, when porn became free in India, uh, the rate of rapes have just only been upward. The scale only has been upward. It has never gone down. And now, um, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's probably porn that is doing that. Of course, there are other things. There are I mean the gender and sex ratio. There are 37 million more men in India than women. There's no interaction with the opposite sex. All of these things, they are a part of it, but also porn is a very major addition to the reason that all of this is happening. So, um, kind on the watching of porn is not acceptable in the Indian society, and the only kind of people who are supporting it are the liberal feminists who have only got their knowledge from following American feminist pages or American or English feminist pages, but this is not the kind of feminism that we have ever had in India, and this is not the kind of society that we have in India.
Okay, thank you for all that information. It was a lot of new information for me too. Like I didn't know that the government was planning to ban porn. Um, and I would just quickly ask, how were they planning to do that? Like, like how do you do that technically? Do you shut down certain websites, or do you know what they were planning to do?
I'm guessing they were planning to shut down websites, and also, like, if you open any website, then there's an ad um, on either side of the screen. Like, if you click on this, then you can watch porn or something like that. So I'm guessing they were also planning to ban that, and of course there was going to be banning of websites. But citizens, especially men, decided that no, they do want to watch porn. So now we have free porn over here, and we also have the consequences for it.
And I totally agree with you that porn is a contributing factor. Like it just porn by itself, I don't think that, well, maybe um, that couldn't create this level of violence, but it sort of falls on fertile ground. Like there are already a lot of misogynistic attitudes that boys and men are raised with, and then porn affirms those, and then it lends specific, essentially instructions on how to degrade a woman, and in that way, and then it also suggested that degradation is normal, and I think that's how it brings about. Um, this is how it contributes and can increase sexual violence. Um, there's actually another question from the chat. Um, someone's asking, I have never heard of this. I don't even know what it's about. The question is, how widespread is Savita Babi in India?
Okay.
What is
Um,
that?
okay, so Savita Bhabi is it's it's a comic about it's actually about male fantasy of your brother-in-law banging his uh, like if you're a woman, then your brother-in-law wanting to bang you. That's a kind of male fantasy prevalent in India. So, if we look at from the perspective of of the man, then the man wanting to bang his bhabi. Bhabi means sister-in-law. So, Savita is her name. Okay, so that's something that is um, like there's a comic about it. Um, like how you have, DC and Marvel comics. We have Savita Bhabi, we have Chacha Chaudhary, and comics like that. So Savita Bhabi is something um, like how you search stepfather banging stepdaughter, or how
Yeah. Mm.
that's a common porn fantasy that men have. So Savita Bhabi is like that kind of male fantasy in India. uh, the man wanting to bang his sister-in-law. That's something prevalent, and almost everybody who knows about porn knows about Savita Bhabi. So it's not something like it's not something a title given to a specific person. It's something that is kind of common in erotic culture, if I should say that.
Okay. Thanks for answering. Um, yeah. Well, I was just thinking about it the other day. Is that the whole thing of transgressing social rules and boundaries has such a potential for good, but also such a potential for just um like it's the type of um some things seem transgressive, but actually they might be officially frowned upon, but at the end of the day they reaffirm hierarchies, or they reaffirm like misogynistic values, and Savita Babi seems to be one of those. Like it's a dirty secret, but at the same time, the values that it imparts is, again, women are toys for men and that sort of thing. Okay, the chat also says thanks for answering the question. Um, so we've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes roundabout,
Yeah.
and I don't have any specific topics. Well, I have one more. Um, which is that we didn't cover yet, but I guess also works as a segue from this weird character, and that is as you grow up as a girl, a teenager, and a woman, what kind of role models are present in your society? What are the ones given to you, and then maybe what are some that come from subcultures? Maybe make that the final big question, and then just talk about anything that you feel that we've forgotten or skipped over.
Okay, so as I was growing up, we had this chapter in our textbook of Kalpana Chawla. She was the first Indian woman to go into space. Okay, she went, I mean, she wasn't like she went into space with the help of NASA. So it wasn't entirely India's effort, but she was the first Indian woman to do that. So um, she was like obviously I didn't know her personally, and she died even before I was born. Um, like the landing wasn't successful. She died midway when they were coming back to Earth. So, learning about her, it I think it was at the age of 5 that I started that we started that journey to learning about her, and I think she was the only role model that I had, and I wanted to be a space scientist, and that was probably because of her. She made my um, she made learning about space my passion. Of course, that changed entirely as I grew up, or as I reached my teenagehood. But that was one of the role models. The other one you can think of Indira Gandhi. She was the first female prime minister of India. But I mean, I don't think she's somebody you should look up to. She was a dictator. She was very very cruel. I don't know. I mean, I have still no idea why she took the decisions she took and why she doomed her nation the way she did. So, um, but of course, the textbooks glorify her because they are written by people who come from the same political party that she was from. So the textbooks glorify her, and mainly the kind of representation that I grew up watching of women in media was on television. I mean, women are shown in a very, what should I say, like they should always obey their husbands, always obey their in laws, especially her mother in law, and the serials, the kind of TV shows that we had to watch were of mother-in-law and the woman fighting. Like that's the kind of thing that is so prevalent on Indian television. That's the only kind of television that we get. Um, Woman fighting with her mother-in-law. So that's something very common on Indian television. That's something we had to grow up watching. Um, in movies, of course, there's obeying your husband, praying for his better health, or praying for him to be, you know, prosperous, or away from any kind of evil. His, what should I say, his dying at the age of um, 95 or something for his good age or something like that. And like that's the only kind of representation that I saw as I was growing up. Now in media, there is a kind of change. Uh, Even though there's still a lot of sexualization of women, um, but there's also a kind of change happening, like women leaders or women going out of their homes. That is something very uncommon in the Indian society. Women going out on her own, going to other places other than her hometown, her own city, her own state, her own nation. That's also kind of a shift you can see in the media. Um, that's probably because of liberal feminism, and that's also because the kind of movies that you watch in Bollywood, um, they were like they're very monotonous in the kind of topics that they have. It was becoming kind of a bore for the audience, a bore for the actors. So that was gaining a lot of criticism. So there was this kind of shift happening, and it's still continuing. I mean, the misogyny is still there, it's present even more than before. But there's also this kind of change that that is gaining a lot of positive views.
Okay. There are more questions from the chat. Do you still have time?
Yeah, I
Okay.
have, I think, 20 minutes more because my laptop is dying.
Okay. Um, the next one question that would be connected to the movie scene is someone's asking, how does society view women who want to become Bollywood actresses or mainstream singers?
Oh, okay. So there's no um, there's no kind of there's no stigma for um, going into that field. The stigma is mainly of being unemployed because of going into that field. Okay, so like I said, I was my parents wanted me to take up science. So that was mainly because if you go into something artistic, if you go into singing or acting or something like that, then you will mainly end up unemployed your entire life. So it's not like being a heroine or being a singer is something bad or something considered bad in the society. It's not something your parents will hate you for or your relatives or family or something, but they are mainly concerned about you never finding a job. Like, better be a doctor, better be an engineer, or better, I don't know, better be a business person or something like that, because then you will have social acceptance, and then like these kind of jobs, they thrive even if the economy is bad, even if the market is bad. Like, a doctor always earns. So I don't know. The stigma is mainly because of unemployment and not because of the kind of career they would want to choose.
Okay. Um, then the other question is about, um, so on the one hand, which feminists are well known in India right now, today, and which ones um, do you think do good work? Can you
Do good work. Okay.
recommend
So
some names?
yeah. Um, I should mention that the Indian society is like the women are refrained from talking so much, or they are kept in the parda system so much, or they are not allowed to take some forward action so much that we even have had male feminists. So I should mention that Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he was one of the first Indian feminists. He was a man, of course. He was a king, and what he did was he married.
Oh, I think um, there's a problem with the connection. Might have been that Sakshi's laptop just died. Let me see if I can get in touch with her. What? It says that she's still online. Let's try again. Okay. Um, it's probably that her laptop just died, but I can ask her to send me some names and articles about um, famous feminists and women who she supports. I know she grew up in a Hindu family. That's what. Ah, hey.
Oh, finally. Sorry, my laptop died.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, so how much did you hear?
You started talking about a king, a male feminist.
Yeah. So his name was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. So he married a widow. Okay, and that was at the time of we were still being colonized by the Britishers, and that was something um, a very big step to take in such regressive society. That's something like, and he also married like the widow that I mentioned. He was younger than the woman that he married. So um, that was something a very big leap to take the society forward. And um, one more man that I should mention is he's from Tamil Nadu. He makes pads for women. Um, the ones that we use when we have a cycle. Um,
There's a Netflix documentary about this, isn't there?
yeah, and we also have Bollywood movies about it. So, um, this man, I mean, I think you can call him a feminist because he chose to do something that even the women didn't want to do. When he wanted to talk about it, when he, wanted to, um, what should I say, when he wanted to be open about this topic of monthly cycle that women have, um, he went to ask his wife. That's the woman you're most intimate with. That's the woman you think will answer your question. But his wife slapped him instead of answering the question. Um, so this man, he what he did was he made a pad. Okay, um, like he bought a pad from market. He saw he saw what its components were, and he thought of making it on his own. Like he's kind of an inventor. He makes machines and such. Like he understands machines very well. So he started making it on his own at home. Then, when he understood how it can be made for such cheap price and how it can help women so much, um, he started engaging more women to sell it. You know, so he employed women um, on his machine, and they started selling the pads that he used to make. Now it has gone, the kind of like the movement has gone nationwide, and his name is Lakshmi Prasad, the man's name. Um, so I think you can call him a feminist. Oh, wait a second. His name is not Lakshmi Prasad. I'm so sorry. Um, his name is Arunachalam Muruganantham. He's from Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. So I think you can call him a feminist. As far as women are concerned, um, there is one woman from Uttar Pradesh. Um, she started a gang of women to fight to fight men who were abusers of women. She wanted,
Gulabi gang?
yeah, Gulabi gang. So that woman, I mean, she's now in politics, and I mean, she has lost her, um, what should I say, the status as a feminist, because now she, being affiliated with a political party comes with, what should I say, being, you have to be, you can't be a leader of the working class, and you can't be a political leader at the same time. So now she has lost all her charm of being a feminist. Um, so wait a second, I don't know her name, so I'm looking it up. Um, Her name is Sampat Pal, and she started her gang in Banda, Uttar Pradesh. So um, she she gave women a wooden stick to fight off um, domestic abusers, and later on, when she moved on to a political party, her gang has, I don't know, it's not as active, and it's not very, um, it doesn't get as many praises as it used to get. Yeah, so other feminist icons, mm, yeah, there's one woman I should mention. Wait a second. Mm, uh, One second. Yeah, Ratna Pathak. Um, this woman, she's an actor, and she kind of does. Um, she particularly picks up roles that are, not as much regressive, that are there in Bollywood, like particularly woman bowing down to her husband, or bowing down to her family or something like that. She picks up roles that are different. So her movie, Lipstick Under My Burqa, is definitely a must watch. Um, she's commendable in it, and she's like one of the very few actors who 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 doesn't get much affected by the fame that they receive. Like mostly in Bollywood, what happens is actors start doing movies for social change only because they can't get a part in bigger movies. So when they do get a part in bigger movies, they reveal that okay, they have a kind of conservative mindset, or they support fascist dictators or something like that. So she's one of the very few actors who hasn't done that yet, and her movie roles, her roles on television, they are very good. Like those are must watch. Um, there's one more woman that I don't know the name of, but I know her by face. Let me look up her name. Uh, yeah, so Kamala Bhasan. She's she's a well-known feminist, and she holds events. She has talk shows. Um, she shows up. for interviews and things like that. And Kamla Bhasan is like she has been a social worker for so long in the most deprived and depraved states of India. Um, like now she's very well known in um, social and NGO circles. Like if you are a social worker and if you are in an NGO or something, then you definitely know Kamla Bhasan. So these are, I think, uh, the most feminist people I can think of in India. Otherwise, I don't follow Lib Fem all that much. Um, the ones who are outspoken about, the choice feminism and all. I don't follow them all that much. But I think these people are somebody who are very well known. Hello.
Yeah. Sorry, I turned my mic off.
Oh,
Um, I was gonna ask, do you know, like later on, I want to look into the different names you mentioned. Some of them I didn't know. But at the top of your head, maybe, do you also know lesser known feminists that are more radical or maybe become a communist feminists? Do you have um, any there as well? Or any English speaking blogs or anything that international feminists can check out?
yeah. There's this one communist, Anuradha Gandhi, that you should know. Anuradha Gandhi, she also has written articles and such. Blogs, I don't think any communist or radical feminist that I know of write blogs or something like that. Um, Mainly, it's the lib fem who do that. And even if somebody does blog writing, I don't think um, it's particularly for a topic. Like there's no radical feminist who only likes to write her blog for um, about, like she won't only write her blog about the topics that radical feminists have talked about or they have worked against or they have worked for. um, I don't think there's any particular feminist that I know of, or there's no particular Marxist or communist who actively writes blogs. The ones, like I mentioned, Anuradha Gandhi, these are the ones who actively engage with people. So I don't think they are that much active on the internet. And if there is blog writing, then it's mainly by LibFem. So I'm sorry, I don't think I can help you with that.
Okay, no problem. Then, um, there was one more question from the chat, but I don't. I feel like Google might be best to answer that. There's the question of, what's the ratio of men watching Bollywood movies? Essentially, who's the target audience for those movies? I would assume both men and women, right? Because that's the biggest market.
Yeah, the movies are targeted at both men and women, and um, it's not something that's mainly catered to the male audience. I mean, of course, it is catered to the male audience, but it's mainly because, like at least in American movies, we can assume that if the director is focusing on the ass and the tits of the actor or the heroine, then it's because he's a male director. But in Bollywood, there are female directors as well who like to make these romance movies where you know the hero is chasing woman and the woman falls for the hero. Like he's entirely stalking her and she still falls for him. There are a few female directors who like to make movies different than what we see normally, but there are male directors as well who like to make different movies. So I think the kind of regressive and what should I say, broad-minded, should I say, movies, they come from both female and male directors. So it's not just one sex or one gender doing that. If I'm guessing that's the kind of answer they were hoping for, or that's something the question was based around.
Yeah, I think so. Then my final question would just be to ask you what your plans are for your future, um, both in terms of political and personal, um, where you want to go, what you want to do, um, how feminism will be part of that, or what you plan to focus on.
Okay, so right now I'm in India and I'm going to disobey and going to defy as many um, societal norms that are expected of me, or societal expectations that are placed on my gender. And after that, I definitely wish to move to, a more developed nation where at least I won't be, I don't know, maybe demarcated from the society because of what I do. Like in India, if a girl rejects a boy for his advances, for a relationship or something like that, then a boy might attack her with acid, or with all the kind of rape and gang rape prevalent in India. Uh, it's um, it's absolutely, what should I say? It's kind of difficult to take a step when you are kind of broad-minded, when you do want to make change to the society, but the consequences of it might be so dire that it might be fatal, or it might, even if you live long enough, then that will scar you for life. So I wish to um, move to a place where uh, I don't know, I might not be attacked as much, and I might not be threatened as much. Politically, I wish to remain communist for the rest of my life. I don't wish to become part of the 1% that holds all the wealth in their hands and deprive the working class of the basic necessities. Um, and yeah, as far as radical feminism is considered, it's um, it's something that I have always appreciated. I've always appreciated radical feminists for the work they have done, for the topics they have brought forth that communist men choose to ignore. And I appreciate them for, I also agree with them on a lot of topics. Um, and if, um, I don't know, if we could somehow make men who are communist change, or at least see the way how radical feminists are correct on a lot of things, then I would love to do that. I would love to. take that forward, and I love to be a part of it.
That sounds like a challenging but interesting project. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've considered that as well, getting more in touch with the further to the left political people in my country. Um, I have some friends in that area, so um, I'll see how that goes. Um, but I'm gonna ask the chat one more time. This would be probably run your last chance to ask a question if there's another one. Otherwise, um, I think this would be a good point to end the stream because we've covered many different topics. Um, and if there's interest, we can also do a second one. Like if you feel that we haven't covered some issues that are important, we can do that as well. Um,
Okay, so sure, if they have any more questions or if you have any more questions, then we can do a second one. I probably don't think that I have anything else more left to speak about. I think we covered everything that we did previously. Um, so yeah, if people have more questions, then I would love to answer them. But I don't have anything to talk about personally.
okay. So there's just someone wishing you best of luck with your plans,
Oh, thank you.
and several people said that you were doing great. So
Oh,
uh,
that's
yeah. And then later on, you can send me some links about those different feminists, and we can post them so that anyone who catches up, watches the live stream, can have a look if they're interested.
sure.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, then I'll say goodbye to the chat for now.
Okay.
Okay. Then goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening, and hope
Bye.
to have you listen again another time. Bye.
Bye bye.